extraterrestrials, fairies, whatever you are, welcome. Amazing space together, for everything that has worked, for everything that hasn't worked, because we've learned from it, and we'll go out into the world and we'll do it again even better next time. But for now, let's remember why we are here. This beautiful, beautiful fire. We started a ceremony here 3 days ago. On Friday, we opened up the idea that there was a seed, there was a centre of calm, and we could create a boundary within which magic can occur. Have we had some magic here? Yeah. Children, have you had some magic here the last few days? Yeah. Yes? Unicorn, did you have some magic here? Okay, so what we want to do is we want to remember that what we do here is we connect with our tribe to reignite the fire within us so that we can go back out into that other world and we can take the magic that each of us has and share it with the world and make that world brighter so that sooner rather than later, this is the reality for everyone. Are we in agreement?
Hello. What a nice gathering, wasn't it?
It was really, that was just how I would like them to go. Yeah.
It's really, really nice when people are getting the message, isn't it?
Yeah.
And understanding what's being relayed and what work that's being done to help people kind of go through that process of understanding the conditioned mind and the baggage that we bring and trying to shred those skins and layers so we can kind of get to our pure being.
Our essence.
Yeah.
That's
That's a magical process to see.
It's
I think it's quite scary for people as well to start opening that up, and I saw people starting to open, which was really, really beautiful to see that.
During the actual ceremony or during the festival?
During the festival.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Throughout, it's been incredibly powerful. So tell me about you.
Oh my goodness, where do you
Tell
want to
me,
start?
you started your story a moment ago, saying how you first started going into your kind of own healing processes and the need to be grounding yourself, and you learned that from a very young age.
Yes. I mean, I think I'm going to relate it to birth because it's so much of what I do. But
Okay.
like, I know I was a very longed-for child. I know my parents had waited for, well, they tried for many years to have me, and just when they were at the point of giving up, they were pregnant. So I was carried in this light womb for a long time, but actually my first entry into any sort of self-awareness work was rebirthing when I was 14. And this is because I was really overweight, really depressed, really unhappy. Like, I didn't know what it was at the time, but now I understand. I was an emotional sponge, a really sensitive soul. And I'd picked up so much toxicity from the immaturity, the emotional and mental immaturity of my parents and my familial lineage, I'll say, rather than ancestral, because it's not my soul lineage as much as it's my human DNA lineage. Yeah. I was just bloated with pain. So I know from about as young as 4, I was terrified of death, 4 or 5, like this idea of being nothing scared me so much, I just couldn't believe it. And the story of Christ and going to heaven and the way my grandmothers told me didn't feel real, it didn't feel like it was right, and no one could tell me. You know, there was no sacredness around me to say you're safe. A bit like what you just said about when you're starting to awaken, it's scary, you know.
Yeah, definitely, because you have to start to face those inner fears and those questions of what is life, what's going on inside me emotionally, and
absolutely.
You know, why do I feel fear when I do this? And
and it was very simple from a young age, but there was no one around to say it's okay, what you're feeling is normal, you're sensitive to the pain of the world, and I'm going to show you how to manage that pain. So there was none of that, you know. It was just totally trying, you know, in the darkness basically. So I think I absorbed a lot of darkness. The rebirthing work at 14 opened me up to planetary healing, because the same woman did healing meditation. So 14, 15 I was involved in all of that. I had seeds quite early on, but sort of moving forward, I had a desperate need to have a baby from about the age of 8.
Okay.
And I met a man who wanted to have a baby with me when I was 21. And I made a baby with a man I'd known for 6 weeks, who I was deeply in love with. We, as much as you can, whatever you conceive love to be at that age. And the long and short of it is the pregnancy, the instability, then discovering that I knew he had mental health issues, but I didn't know how to deal with them. And then the fears of being a pregnant woman, being terrified of birth, giving birth, then being a single mum within 10 months of the baby being born.
Yeah.
All of this led
So
me...
not having that support as
No
well,
support,
so
yeah.
you had to rely on yourself.
Yes. It was a constant story in my life of there wasn't anyone that could help me to grow, right? So you either feel completely alone and abandoned, or you realise Source is your guide, right? So a lot of the things, I've trained in lots of different modalities, but in the end I consider myself a renegade in each of them because I haven't had a pure lineage anywhere. I didn't go to India and get my initiation as a yogi. My mum's my Reiki master. I was born breech, so I'm going to keep going back to birth, so I do everything bum first, arse about face, usually dive in at the deep end.
Yeah.
And so, my daughter's birth led me I trained as a yoga teacher, and then I was specialising in pregnancy yoga. And then I was learning about cellular memory. And I didn't know for years that actually all of the work I do through Birthlight as a tutor, so teacher trainer, is underpinned by the research of Dr. Bruce Lipton.
Okay.
Right, so he's an epigeneticist, I presume you know about him, yeah? And so this whole idea of understanding that the sort of genetic nurture debate, nature-nurture debate, is really, we've moved on because we know now that our nurturing will trigger elements of our genetics and how important it is to create the space. Now back to this story of being a longed-for child, because this really ties in. So here I am having my rebirthing experience, and it's a struggle to get out. I can feel my mum, but I'm scared. And then at some point, the curtains close, and it's like a blackout. And I'm just on my own screaming for my mum. This is what it felt like. Now, as I've done more work with it, I realised that's when my mum had the epidural. So she numbed out. I was terrified. I've had an epidural with my daughter, there's no judgment, it's just where it was at. And so my entry into the world was when you're scared, numb out. So whether it's food, coffee, chocolate, bags, weed, whatever, it's like, this world's scary, I need a buffer, right? So that was my search. If I was a renegade teenager and I was really quite rebellious, I was in a lot of pain. So everything through,
And we tried to cover that pain.
I was already starting to be open to ideas, but you can imagine my peers just laughed at me. At 15, if I'm saying this is the only planet of choice and I'm reading this amazing book and we're co-creators of our reality, and they're like, whatever, weirdo,
But your parents must have been quite open to it if your mum's done Reiki and...
It was when we left home. I left home at 16, my sister at 14, so when I say we left home, we went to boarding school. We lived in Singapore at the time. So we've also travelled a lot, and I think that helped a lot. But basically we were fortunate enough to be able to go to school in England. We went to different schools, so there was this disbanding of family as well, and this whole thing about community and coming back to yourself, and like, if something is not well, you can't try and fix it out there, you've got to come inside, right? So I went where I felt most nurtured and nourished, which was a lovely boarding school, but I was still suffering. My bulimia days were over, more or less, but I was really overweight. And it was just like knowing this wasn't who I was, but determined to discover who I was.
Yeah. But I think that's so important message for people to understand how it was for us and our own struggles and our own stories of that suffering, to see that transformation can be made. And you wouldn't think that now your story to be the case. You would assume that, oh, this person's just always been uber confident and always in flow for finding the right things and blessed life, really.
No.
But then when we look behind the scenes, everyone has their shadow, and it's what actually brings us to have that great wisdoms of life, isn't it?
Totally, and you know what? It's like, what saves me now, because the biggest thing's been about guilt, like self-guilt, self-hatred, self-anger. Those are the toxic feelings and thoughts that are so hard to work with, that you do just want to numb out. You don't want to deal with it. It's painful, especially when you can start to have compassion for the people in your life that you've hurt and see things from their level, which comes with time. But, you know, the whole thing with the pain that we're in, I think you can't be a saint without having been a sinner first. And I've definitely, the only way I've learned compassion is to go onto the other side of whatever I previously judged and realise that,
so you can empathise.
yeah, love needs to come in there. I've done terrible things, terrible things, in my opinion, in terms of morality, as I've learnt who I am as a being of love.
And not to kind of diminish responsibility of those things, because it's really important that we take ownership of those.
Yeah.
But it's interesting when we follow that thread and that cord, that it comes from a place of carrying other baggage and other conditionings, that of our ancestors, our parents, our grandparents, and maybe how the upbringing, and when we start to realise those connections and realise it's not ours,
Yes.
and we start to drop those, then we can step into that heart space.
You really hit on a point there, because I think if we think of the social conditioning as essentially based on religion, you know, in any culture there's a religious connotation. So in my world, your world, it's Christianity, right? And, you know, I'm going to give you an example that's really personal, but like my mum, you know, experienced adultery through my dad. He cheated on her. And I remember the pain as a child. I remember my dad leaving. I remember my mum's pain. And did I ever think as an adult that I would end up cheating on my partner? No, but I did. And that's how I learned how much in pain we can be, that we seek something outside to make us feel better. And that whole trading sex for love, addictions, you know, like all of it is like we're all addicted to feeling good. You know, we want to feel good because our natural state is to feel good. But as a child, I looked around and I saw that the people that had the most fun time and looked to be happiest were always drinking and smoking. You know, it's parties, isn't it, you go to as an adult, as a child. So, of course, all I wanted to do was drink and smoke and flirt, and as you know, as soon as I could. And I had no idea how much pain people were in.
Because they're covering it all up.
Absolutely. I mean, it looks like
It's like running away from the... It's interesting, what is it that people are searching? Is it to be loved, to be held, to feel accepted, or is it a search to understand what we really truly are? And ultimately that is the search, but I think there's different levels of it, depending on where people are at. Ultimately the search is to understand what our true essence is, but on top of that is to be loved, and all of those things to have that, and that's what kind of turns us inward.
yeah, it's being able to identify those needs first, which is what do we need, and then recognise we are all of those things inside of us. And when we nurture that inner fire, our outer world will reflect it back to us. And there's been layers and layers. I mean, my goodness, I honestly don't think I've taken my foot off the pedal in terms of self-development, conscious self-development, since I was a teenager. And I didn't realise how hard I've been on myself until very recently. And like, when I look at it, and I think so many people go through this, they start on a path of self-discovery, it gets a bit hard, then they encounter something again and they're like, I thought I dealt with this. And they either keep going or they give up on themselves and go, it doesn't work, or they seek another method or another this. And this constant searching outside is what we've got to learn. It's the same in pregnancy and birth and working with fertility. You know, show me how I can get pregnant, how can I get pregnant? Well, you're going outside everywhere. And it's like, well, it's in here. This
The
connection.
release is there.
The release is there, the information is there, the healing is there, and of course, look at how sick Mother Earth is. Look at the archetype of the mother. We're strung out, exhausted, trying to work, look after our house, look after our children, meet all of their needs. Nervous systems are up here. And it's like how, the only way I can see us really healing the planet is it's a two-way thing. It's what do I need to heal?
It's knowing what enough is as well, and getting that balance, isn't it? Because you can use Mother Earth as a great example of that. You know, putting so much pressure on resources.
Yeah.
You know, that's the same as putting so much pressure on ourselves. It's that reflection.
Yes, yes, yes.
And that just kind of is exactly what we do to ourselves.
Yes.
You know, we put so much pressure on our own resources, and we're doing it to our earth. And when people can make that connection that there's no separation. You know, that symbolic reference between the two is the same. You know, if we can get it right for ourselves, then we can understand how much we need to take from the earth and give to the earth, and bring that harmony and balance to the world.
Yeah, and when we're really connected to source. So let's look at it exactly what you just said. So if I give the example of the human, because we're strung out, we rely on coffee, sugar, carbs to give us energy, right? Think about the planet. We're relying on fossil fuels, we're relying on energy sources that are finite. And we've created this whole false construct. We're surrounded by tents here, so it's like an inner tent within a tent, right? This false construct is our third dimensional reality, which is that we have to go out and work. We have to, you know, someone has to pay us. We need the security of a government. We need the security of a healthcare system, a bank, monetary system, all the things that we're used to that we think is real life. And it's all bollocks. It's all absolute bollocks. We don't need any of it as it currently is. But let's just take any industry. My partner's in construction, right? So at the moment he is moving machines around, digging stuff up, whatever he does to help build concrete, massive things that are toxic, right? We could look at that as plastic surgery to make us feel better, or whatever, you know, whatever we need, surgery and so forth. Now imagine these not industries, but these different modalities shifting. So instead of construction being about building toxic buildings, it's about building earthships. It's about building in harmony with the planet. If hospitals were actually places of wellness, of teaching how to stay well and in harmony with nature, and how to, exactly what you said, you know, how much is enough? Well, why don't you have a chicken? Why don't we have some chickens for our eggs, and a cow for this community? And instead of having an over surplus of everything we don't need and wasting things, we just see what we need in these pods. And then this self-governance of being able, we talked about community and the shadow of community, and how we have these lovely ideas of how our ancestors lived, and we're sort of recreating that, but actually we're not them, and we need something new.
Yeah, because
we've evolved. Yeah.
And consciousness wants to explore new ways of living in diverse ways, in harmony.
As long as we don't hurt ourselves, we don't hurt each other, we don't hurt the planet. So we have this opportunity to recreate what is already here, and I believe it's going to happen from within. I work with mainstream, so I don't mean to judge or anything like that, but most of my clients are in that world.
Yeah.
They're not this world, you know. So planting these seeds and supporting them as they open their eyes, and they're terrified by what they're seeing. Fake news, lies, you know, we know the governments lie, but we still accept it somehow. Like, we want truth.
That seems to be part of almost an evolutionary kind of imprint in some way, which we work through. I always like to relate it to art. You know, it's like up until like Renaissance, everything was kind of picture perfect, detailed looks. You know, you look out and the picture was what you were seeing, and then abstract art came along, and what did people do? They rejected it. Said, "What? This isn't art." You know, Picasso was rejected, Van Gogh was rejected, and it took the early adopters that got it and understood it, and the visionaries that painted that picture to be adopted, for it to gently feed out, and as it fed out and hit whether you want to use the term critical mass, that people started to get it. But by that point, consciousness and evolution has already moved on. So the visionaries and the early adopters are already on something new. So it's always being filtered. And I think, you know, this is almost because we couldn't have everyone being visionaries and early adopters. You need, like in the ants and the bees, you need the worker ants and the bees, and that's not putting any injustice to that, to work the land, but they have to put trust in the people that have that divine connection.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why, you know, we wouldn't be in the state if we were being led by spiritual gurus and leaders in that way, that have ridded themselves of ego and understand the divine connection. Then we wouldn't be having these misconceptions being...
It's like the lowest component of our humanity is running the planet. That's the truth. It's like the lowest level of consciousness on Earth is currently in power. But it's not, because exactly what you said, I love it, with the art and the visionaries. Okay, so when a woman's breastfeeding, there comes a point that the baby has a growth spurt. There's not enough supply for this. So mum has to basically sit there while the baby just goes to get more out, so that the supply will build.
Yep.
And I kind of see us visionaries and early adopters as the ones that go out. We've always been ridiculed, but we are, you know, because it's the new. and then eventually it catches on and that's the norm. And you think about how we've swung from religious indoctrination, which, you know, this is our most recent 6,000, 7,000 years of patriarchal rule, through to prove it with science, only to find that science is subjective too. I love this, you know, like,
it's great.
It's just hilarious, like, you can't pin it on that either. So what is the barometer of your soul? Oh, not the heart in pain, the higher heart. And our vision now, because we're always that step ahead, we're the baby demanding the supply, is like, okay, now we want to co-create leadership that is really sound, that we can trust these people have done the inner work and we feel it and we can see what they stand for. And you know, a lot of the time, like, you know, we're at a festival now, Into the Wild, this beautiful example. We had an opening ceremony, we had a closing ceremony. Not everyone was going to be there, not everybody gets the spiritual significance of what we're doing with opening and closing portals, but in dancing, in being happy, in choosing to come somewhere where the focus isn't to numb out, and in that fact that enough of us anchored our light, became acupuncture needles into the earth to anchor light here.
Ripple out.
It ripples out. So their energy, then their good times. So that's why I feel like we can actually do it from within. And I don't think we've got an apocalypse coming. I feel within our lifetimes we are learning to unlearn, and it's going to happen really quickly in some elements, and in other elements really slowly. Like, you remember the fire at Beltane just went off, and this one was really slow, and it's the medicine of the time. So
it's showing to be steady in that sense.
But people wanted a performance. You know, our opening ceremony, where people were like, well, that's it, and it's like, you're the magic, hon. What are you expecting? Us to bezazzle you? No, that's not what this is about. But you'll discover that.
That then comes from kind of the ego sense of wanting to have an impressive reaction to things, isn't it?
And for us also the lesson was, I mean, like last time I really felt I needed the reassurance. It was the first time I'd done a ceremony at a festival, that it was what people needed and wanted. And I got so many people commenting, and it was great because it just made me think, okay, I got that. I channeled source, because that's all I'm meant to do, ground and channel. If I start coming from me, it all screws up. It's not about me. It's like, just say the words that come. That's what you do. And I have to do some planning, and there's always this element of chaos that scares me because I want to get it right and I want to get all those elements in that people have shared with me.
You have to surrender to that moment.
Exactly. You just gotta go,
because otherwise it's not being in the moment, and then the source cuts.
Exactly.
It doesn't come through, does it, any longer?
And the opening ceremony, not one person came up to me afterwards and went, nice ceremony. And you know what, it was great. It was just what I needed, because I actually didn't need the reassurance. I didn't feel I needed it. I felt like I just needed to give from a humble place and to just get on with the festival. I didn't run any workshops, any cacao ceremonies, didn't do anything that's me doing my thing. Because you know what, I'm knackered. This is the balance of, okay, how many years have I been doing this? I was 15, I'm now 39. It's been a while, right? And I'm now seeing, only now, that the balance of giving and receiving has been really out. And I've seen it at different stages, like different, Enjoy Yoga was a lesson, now Rozy Glow's a lesson, but learning to be authentic, true. I'm not perfect, I have come a long way, I really know my shit in lots of areas, other areas I'm still growing, but like, wow, I can just come and be quite invisible, and I can be comfortable with that. And I'm not looking for a lover, and I'm not looking for a high, and I can just feel it all. Big lesson. Beautiful.
Don't have to go anywhere, really.
No.
Just sit and be.
Yeah. So all of it, like really, all the work that I do is just awakening the magic within people, I think.
Also it's interesting to, because a lot of people would say, oh, it's just a lot of hippies in the field, you know, looking at the light and looking at the love and everything's perfect and everything's fine. But it's not, because you're looking at actually all the painful stuff. And accepting it and seeing the changes of, it's not like we're bypassing the emotions of sadness, we're accepting the emotions of sadness and seeing also that the happiness passes, everything's passing. And it's that looking for what doesn't pass that really brings us that true inner peace, isn't it? And what then allows us to be of service to help others. Yeah,
it's the constant, and I think you're right, because you know, how many workshops have there been here? Like, these hippie festivals are not places of denial. They're not places, well, when you bring consciousness in, as we have, They're places to work through our shadow, to celebrate our light, and you are forever changed if it is that learning to live consciously with the seasons again, with the changing times, and to keep anchoring, whether it's, you know, a festival, an equinox, a solstice, or whether it's the phase of the moon, but you keep finding your anchor into the now through where you are and checking in with what's growing, what's not growing. That's taught me a lot, and I think for all of us, men and women, to come back into harmony with our essence. We are spirit, but we are also in human form, so
Yeah,
we're divine
have to accept
humans.
that,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we have to find that balance between the two, and it's different for each of us. And that's why I think those three basic rules, you know, just don't hurt yourself, don't hurt each other, don't hurt the environment. Don't like the don't bit, but love yourself. You know, love each other,
Be
love the
open to
planet.
one another and accepting of everyone, because I think the interesting thing is when you start to see, and it, you know, it can sound corny to those that aren't used to terms like that, but when we look out and we see brothers and sisters, our friends, family, however you want to see people that are walking around amongst us, when you start to see them as actually just they're reflections of you, so you're like a feminine version of me, having you're having your experience, or I'm having my experience as a you know, as my feminine side, and there's lots of those versions of me in the masculine and feminine all around. So then when I can empathise and see what stages they're at and accept where they're at and how they're walking on,
You
on the
are
earth.
I remember
Yeah,
Carl used
you
to
are
have
I.
those stickers years ago when I first met him. You are I. And yes, some mirrors we like more than others. But this judgment thing's so important because, like, we get into this place of awakening and then we start judging everybody for not being awake. And then you've got vegans waging war on meat eaters because they're so angry about this. Those energies are what we still have to work with.
But then you've got to find that harmony of balance, haven't you? Because actually I was thinking a lot about this with the animal industry and farming. If you look at actually how we used to live more nomadic ways and go hunting, and I mean before guns, with
Yeah.
a bow and arrow,
Yeah.
and you're taking that spirit of that animal,
Yeah.
but maybe you would only eat meat once in a month.
Very rare, yeah. Very rare.
And you would really embody the lessons of that animal into you. I mean, how different is that?
Massive. The reverence is massive. We have to go back to reverence. And I understand the anger. You know, the anger is part of the awakening because of the sadness and the grief, the pain that's underneath. We have to ask these questions. I don't eat meat myself. You know, I eat very limited dairy as well. So it's not a judgment either way. It's just more a how can we then, if someone needs to eat it, for example, make peace with the fact that actually an animal should be, I don't even like the word killed, but hunted consciously, sacrificed, and we don't need an over surplus of dairy, like to know what's going on in the industries, to demand change, but to do it from a place of maturity rather than the place that is unhealed. We're having to do it in how we relate to each other as men and women. We've both done the workshop, but we also, as a society, if we snap at each other and we just attack, that's when it gets personal and unpleasant.
That's coming from our pain again.
It's coming
isn't
from
it?
pain. So, do we react with more pain, or do we hold space and direct a new way?
Try to to make that space in between that reaction, so you can become aware of it and just view it. Yeah.
And that does come back to the compassion for the self. So, on a practical level, your breath, you know, breathing in, breathing out is the first bit. Once you've able to take a long out breath, and then you can take a deep in breath, because for many people that's really challenging. Then you can focus on the space between the in breath and the out breath and the in breath. That's where the magic, the shift in consciousness, the bridge in consciousness occurs. That's where the idea is seeded. Well, actually, let's take this animal activism, let's take this, let's go lobby the governments to change the way that they're bringing animals to slaughter, let's change the quota of what's allowed and what isn't allowed. Let's just make the change. It has to stop. And if you educate the masses and they see all the different, you know, documentaries that are out there, a lot of people are changing. But we have to look at the reality that as we're evolving this flesh, not everybody can survive as a vegan.
No, exactly.
You know,
But that's again where it comes back to tuning into yourself and working on yourself, and when you work on yourself, you start to realise how much does my body need, how much does it not need. Oh, actually, I'm just desiring to have meat, you know, for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner. Do I need it? You know, that addiction is no different from a cigarette addiction. It's no different from sex addiction or any other addiction. It's that feeling of, actually, all I'm trying to feel is a satisfaction, which comes from, actually, what I'm really trying to satisfy is a void of something that's empty in me. And if I can search for what that is, then everything else falls away, doesn't it?
Totally. And it's the connection to spirit, isn't it? That's what we're all looking for.
And then we realise that actually we're interacting, you know, we are consciousness, so if we're interacting and having the lessons, then you see the symbiotic kind of relationship between all things and what's provided to us, and then that brings us back to how much pressure we're putting on resources through farming and through things. And actually, if we have less, then we start to heal the planet as well as healing ourselves and giving up those desires. It goes full circle and it all kind of fits.
Yeah. And no, I really agree with you, and I think the less is more and then the more is less as well, because we need a lot less of the things that are polluting and a lot more of the things that are nourishing, you know. And it's like being able to look at our own graphic equalizer in our own life and say, okay, if I increase my quota of this, that's going to reduce my dependency on this. I still want it, I'm not ready to let it go. It's a crutch, I know it's a crutch, I know why it's there in my life, but I'm still not quite ready, and I have compassion for myself. Okay, let's just increase this. Everyone's getting there in their own time. Trust, make yourself as well as you can be, forgive the rest, work with it, love it, compassion, shift it. And you outgrow it. I outgrowed making myself puke up. I outgrowed my desire to eat whenever I'm scared. I outgrowed the need to look for sex instead of I've outgrown loads of stuff as I've got myself. But I've still got other things I'm working on. And I haven't completed it, and I'm not purer than now, and you know, like I don't fart rainbows, you know, it's just not happening. I've tried, yeah. I lose my shit a lot, you know, and I say that, you know, because it's like, when we're out of balance, we're out of balance.
That's interesting, because it's like, I was having such amazing times over this weekend, and everything was flowing so nicely, and I've had so little sleep, and it was like, oh, I'm being fed by, you know, just the energies of everything. But then I realised at the point where I was starting to trip over rusty barbed wire, that it was actually telling me, you need to ground yourself. You're burning your own resources so much and so thinly that you have to get that balance, because I am in a human form and I have to respect that, and I can't just keep being up here. And I like being up here, but yeah, that was like pure sign to say, look, you know, it starts to go downhill a bit if you don't get that right balance with the simple things.
When we're starting to hurt ourselves, so when we knock into things and have accidents, it's a definite sign, definitely, that our energy field and our physical body isn't well protected. And it's usually from within. Yeah, it's something that's out of alignment. I talk to myself out loud when I'm at home, because I wanted to start to monitor what is the inner dialogue. And I was so astounded by how unpleasant my inner dialogue was, despite lots of reprogramming my subconscious and everything I've done. And it was like, okay, you're ready to deal with this. You're ready to see that you actually say really unkind things to yourself in your head and about other people, and like not confronting it, allowing that is the right word. So many tears. We've just had these eclipses, you know, so many opportunities are being given to us at the moment to shed our shit, that we either embrace it and look at what's around us, the yeses, to help us to move forward, or we get thrown about like a surfer trying to surf but not knowing how to handle waves and being pushed back down again and again, until it's like no one's punishing you. You're just choosing not to learn how to work with these forces. It's not a punishment. No one's going, here, have it again, have it again. That's just what's happening, because you haven't learned to look yet and go, is there another way of doing this? But the people that are stuck there, boom, boom, there can't be a God, life is unfair, why am I in this state, why have I suffered like this, why was I born like this? You know, no disrespect to everyone's story, because we all have different stories, and some of us, you know, can seem to have much bigger challenges than others initially. But all of that is to start asking the right questions, and we chose it. Anyway.
That makes you, yeah, but that also makes you understand that suffering, you start to see it in a different light, as life, that it's our way of teaching us, and our challenges are our struggles become our challenges to actually bring forth change and growth.
Yeah.
And without them, we'd stay stagnant.
Absolutely.
We'd stay stuck like the water that gets stuck, but
Yeah.
eventually enough rain comes that it starts to come over the edge and starts to drip back into the river and starts to flow again. And that's exactly what we have to start to realise, is to look at that. I mean, I wouldn't be sat here having this conversation in a million years in front of a camera doing anything like that. It's like, really? I would just hide away from all of that had I, from those little voices that would say, you can't, you're not good enough.
And I wouldn't do those ceremonies either if I stopped.
But yeah, it's like, okay, actually I look at the things I fear the most, and I look at my biggest challenges, and I've gone head first into facing them all, and it's been really transformational to do that, and I recommend it.
And me too, that's exactly. Once you decide, okay, I can either continue to run from my fear or I can face it.
Yeah.
And everything you just described to me about the suffering, there is a tremendous value in suffering. However, it is all part of this struggle paradigm that we're moving out of. It's a collective consciousness brought on by the patriarchal sort of era, let's say.
Okay.
And my feeling is we're making a collective consciousness choice to move out of the struggle paradigm into the thriving paradigm. And we have a choice now to create from a place of joy and love. And when we encounter shadow, suffering, whatever, it's an understanding that there's a misalignment there to work with, to release, to then go up. But we don't need to make suffering our main teacher. We can make joy our main teacher. We can make magic our main teacher. And that's a choice we each have.
The question that comes to mind is more for those that I know would be asking it. Those that find it hard to accept, and maybe those that have gone through real traumas in life, and that would be that if everything is grace and everything is love and light, and we are all one, then why is there such things as poverty, murder, rape, and such difficult? Why do some people have to burden such difficult lessons? And yeah, that's...
Yeah. How else do we learn compassion? By witnessing suffering. And this is not, it is all light and love and everything else, but we fell from grace. We're recovering from that fall from grace. If we were once unified consciousness, Source all that is, and in the end Source wanted to know itself, and so created separation in order to see the two sides, or all the sides of all that is. I mean, this is a creation story, whether it's true or not, we discover when we're in another consciousness state, because all of it is trusting the magic before you see the reality. That's we're moving out of that paradigm of, oh, believe it when I see it, and we're moving back into, I'll see it when I believe it. And yes, not wanting to minimize anyone's true suffering. And actually my dad, I think of myself as an angry teenager, who's in control of this place? What's going on? Why is all this allowed to happen? Why isn't anyone stopping? No, and it's all part of this separation, ego consciousness that we've each gone into at different times. Like our souls we're all on this planet together, but our souls are at different stages of evolution.
But it's what consciousness wanted us to go through. Consciousness actually wanted us to understand, about having too much, and about what we're capable of doing, and actually falling into industry and falling into those things. I mean, the things where we took the biggest evolutionary leaps forward in technology was through war, and that's the terrible thing. And why is that? Because they could plough money into that. It seemed like, to survive, we have to plough money into, which they were actually feeding the problem itself. But the interesting part of that, if we were to wake up now and say, oh, hold on a minute, we took the biggest evolutionary leaps forward because we ploughed money into war. Well, what if we actually, tapped money into finding a way to live on the planet without an imprint, and trusting that causes more work, more jobs, and that from that it builds. If we try to build a life that's our highest good and our highest achievements of self, of what we're trying to reflect, I mean, then it all falls into place.
No, I'm with you, and I think this is what I was saying before about the industry shift. Is like we just have to change what the main focus is. It's not about making shareholders rich at all costs. It's about the fact that we are all the shareholders. We are all planet Earth. Consciousness is us, Travis. You know, we didn't. There's nothing outside of us that said, "Here, have this lesson." It's almost like we've all, on a collective, super conscious level, gone, "Fuck, we really need this lesson to move out of this level of density." And in my woo-woo world, so the work that I've been doing and learning more about is that the Earth's actually split now. So there are those who have chosen to continue their soul's growth through the medium of suffering. It really is the fastest and best way for them to actually evolve to a state of unity consciousness. And that there's been so much energy that's built here with all the light workers that have been coming to the Earth for such a long time, that planet Earth has chosen, Gaia has chosen the ascension timeline. So it's like there's been a split that's lit. That's why I keep mentioning the eclipses, and it's sort of coming up to our winter solstice as well, this time period where there's like a reset, and it's like, oh, we're in the antimatter world now. So we're co-creating. So those of us who are wanting to experience what it's like to co-create through love, to own responsibility. The biggest thing with being a co-creator is you have to own everything around you. The pretty, the gorgeous, and the painful as well. And a lot of people don't want that responsibility. That's why they're staying in the suffering paradigm until they realise it is the only way. So we get to build the new world, and we are here. It's coexisting at the same time. It's super exciting. Whilst the others continue what they're doing until it becomes obsolete. And it's like, in the documentary Thrive, I love that documentary. The first 2 hours are the problem, right? And it's depressing. But the last 40 minutes are the solution, and it's very empowering. And the way he talked about going through the different models that we have currently of a political system, from conservatism to liberalism, you know, and socialism, and how we actually bring it back to the fact that technology was supposed to make us have more free time, but all it's done is make us work more, right? From the invention of hoovers and washing machines and whatever. But we are now in a place where we actually don't need to work the way that we've been taught. We could all be involved in different projects that pay us, you know, in shares or whatever, for our involvement in caring for each other, the planet, ourselves. And I'd just say to anyone, watch it if you haven't, because the seed of the new idea is there. And for me, I think we're all recovering from birth trauma, like somewhere along the way, and it's probably the there's the whole Lemurian thing, and, you know, way back, you know, thousands of years. But if we look now and we look at the fact that you create trauma in that primal period, and it's going to keep being recreated. And we're all post Second World War, First and Second World War, 2 generations, right? None of us have got over that. It's in our cellular memory. And we're now working through all of those lessons and healing because we've got the opportunity, because as much as the system is still currently medicalised, within that medicalisation there's been a real move towards freedom and empowered birth. So I'm seeing the seeds. I have to focus on the positive, because I'm very worried about IVF. I'm very worried about the fact that women are sick largely because our nervous systems are thrown out of whack from the moment we start taking the pill, right? But actually endocrine disruptive chemicals are affecting men and women everywhere. And if we are using synthetic hormones to help make babies in the first place, there's a real question mark there.
What is the impact it's going to have on next generation?
Next generation, fertility,
that
birth,
goes
everything.
on with the food, what we're eating with
GM
preservatives.
food, exactly, preservatives.
The water, the chlorinated water, you know, if we're drinking spring water, and there's, you know, you go to Glastonbury, it's pouring all the time, up on the Mendip, it's pouring all the time. There's, when you start to understand that these things make such a big difference to the body, and then how that has an effect on all these things, and the stress of modern day living, if you start to undo those cycles and find that space, then maybe someone doesn't need IVF anymore.
Exactly.
Because they've purified their being, and it comes at the right time. And that's what consciousness is actually trying to show us through the illness and through the things.
That's why I created a program called Conceive with Ease, which was all about like how you clear your subconscious and conscious programming, and how you clear your physical body to receive a high frequency baby. Because I'm convinced those who are not able to have babies are really unwell, Either there's a sorry, when I say that I don't mean as a judgment. I mean there's either physical blockages or emotional blockages or psychological blockages, and the souls that want to come in, there is an element of this person that is ready to host a higher frequency soul, but they're not going to be allowed to have low frequency because we're not doing reincarnation on this planet anymore. We're not doing karma anymore. Everything's changed. So what's going to happen is either they raise their vibration and meet the energy to come in, or they can't have babies and they adopt, or they have egg donors, or but ultimately I see the split, that those who are not willing to do the work and look into themselves are going to end up annihilating themselves. Like, we have choices all along the way, like try this path, and it's really unfortunate to say that it's like the suffering path that we were talking about, and I know this is quite contentious. It's like, what is the payoff for suffering? What is the payoff for staying stuck in the drama of suffering? It's usually not having to take responsibility because we're frightened of getting it wrong. So there's tremendous compassion there.
It's looking at the two fears. Is it more fearful to look at that, or to stay within? And I think it's that ego of, okay, I'm suffering, but I know this suffering, and therefore it's less scary than to go into it and face new suffering, or what would feel like new suffering, or new fear.
Yeah.
When actually it does the opposite.
And I've got some tools to work with that help me feel safe to deal with my pain.
And that's the important thing, is having those tools, tool bag, for doing that.
So each of us who are the visionaries are providing those tool bags and those toolkits, and we're saying, look, this is how I've helped other people to do this. If this resonates with you, go with it. And I'm an ambassador for high frequency souls coming in. I'm not the right person to work with everyone's fertility issues. It's like the women that are drawn to me, the couples that are drawn to me, have star seeds that want to come to them. My job is to raise their frequency to that. Now, are we going to continue to be able to have babies willy-nilly once we stay on the crappy water, the crappy food, the endocrine disruptive chemicals? No, that's what I mean about annihilating ourselves, is that side of things will end up being impossible to make babies. That's in a couple of generations. So those of us who've done the work, wherever you originate from, doesn't matter what dimension and whether you're mainstream or alternative, but have chosen to do the work, will be able to keep bringing in beings onto this planet, and it will be a different quality. The birth, the conception's different, the pregnancy's different, the birth's different, the nurture period's different. These children, when you look at their brains, if they've been nurtured and nourished through the pregnancy, and the only way you can do that is if the woman feels nurtured and nourished, which means the partner needs to feel nurtured and nourished. So that's a tribe, our tribe again. Yeah. How can we do that? There's a part of the brain that's responsible for empathy that does not get switched on in high stress pregnancies. Okay. And I would say to you, Jarvis, that most pregnancies are high stress pregnancies in that world. You don't go to an appointment without being given something else to worry about. And the technology is invariably very wrong. Sometimes it's very right.
It's also the fear of our own bodies, though, isn't it? Especially for women, to go through labour, and we're fed so much fear about.
We are, but if we have a cellular memory,
it's natural.
It is, but if you have a loss in your cellular memory that you haven't cleared, if you have an ancestry that involves either a stillborn or a mother dying, then there's going to be a lot of loss.
So all that fear is coming up of other people's.
Yeah. So that's why the emotional, mental clearing is so important. Yeah. And we have until our children are about 7 years old to do the inner work, so that their brain patterning and their perception of reality can shift with us. But until then, if you look at Bruce's work, that's when their brainwaves shift, and whatever they've absorbed in those first 7 years in time in the womb is what they think reality is. This is how life is according to this little pod, which is what is teaching me the world out there is. And it could be very different, but So there's our responsibility to schools, to any institution that currently exists, to seed with consciousness, and then everybody gets a chance to do the healing, whether they can do it in their family or not, it doesn't matter. Why haven't we got schools where all the food's organic and everybody's not eating wheat?
There are some though.
There are some.
Forest schooling and Steiner schooling and Montessori. There are options, and people need to actually go out and look for them. Find ways of starting them and collaborating, and homeschooling is really,
we need community.
We do. Community schooling.
Yeah, because I was a single mum on tax credit, on benefits, and I had to either not build a life that would sustain me, and therefore home educate and maybe volunteer at one of the schools that cost money to send my daughter, or I had to send her to mainstream school and build a life, and I chose the latter because in the end 16 years is the childhood and then you're out, and it's like I was really young when I had her, so I needed to build a life, and it made me really sad that I couldn't actually offer her a school system that I thought would really nourish her, but it was part of her journey.
Yeah, exactly.
Now we have enough, like with Enjoy Yoga and Quote, which is one of my businesses, we have enough conscious mums from the mainstream and dads that what's to stop us setting up a community nursery? What's to stop us setting up a community school? Little prototypes where we can support each other. There's enough teachers that don't want to. Once they've had their kids, they realise there's no way this 30 children in a class in primary school is taking care of the emotional needs of my baby. I know teachers who've left the profession to home educate their kids because they're like, I thought we were doing a great job until I had kids. And then it's like, no, these little ones are out there having to shut down because they're frightened of these environments. So we know where the need is, we can envision new ideas, we can start trying them out, see what works, what doesn't. What's the difference between success and failure? Not giving up, right? And making it so that every child is entitled to having a conscious education that teaches us about the earth, about how to exist in that 3D matrix world that still exists, and anything they're passionate about, because they've come with passions.
Yeah. And to follow their own sparks.
Yes.
That's so important that we can recognise that in ourselves, that our heart is directing us to what's needed for us to evolve and learn, isn't it?
And it's not stupid.
I've only just really, come to be learning that in more recent years, and it takes me straight back to the things of what I was interested in as the inner child. All those things that I was interested in and where I thrived, or the questions I had, is exactly where I'm at right now. It's just
you
right
mention it, I think of magic. I was so into magic, but I was just told not to be silly.
Yeah.
I had a magic bracelet, and you're right, when you go back, you're like,
I knew it already.
I knew it. And I was
trust in it.
Well, I was told it wasn't real.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, that's where it comes. You believe in it, and then through other people's own belief systems, it gets diminished, and then you get full circle at some point.
And I have conditioned my own child with thoughts like, if you don't work, you don't get paid. If you don't put the effort in, you're not going to get the rewards. And I've often reflect on things that I was so many of my own needs were unmet, that I couldn't emotionally meet my daughter's needs as she was growing up, because I was in survival mode. Just get the money, just pay the rent, just build something that's going to sustain.
Try to breathe amongst it all.
And then I got a kid with mental health issues, other issues, self-harm issues and all the rest of it, and I'm like, whoa, I had all this consciousness, I have all this consciousness, and I haven't been able to protect you from the harshness of this reality, because I was shut down because I hadn't been protected from the harshness, and dealing with that, and oh man, that's been really recent, feeling that, and actually how our relationship has changed. And I'm genuinely like, wow, there are areas I really didn't meet your needs. I couldn't, because mine weren't met. That compassion that we have to have for ourselves as we wake up, whether it's men realising how much they've been cut off from their true masculinity, that they've caused pain to women, whether it's women being cut off from their true femininity and the pain they've caused to men, whether it's what our parents did to us or we did to us. We've all been there, one way or another. So just, compassion.
Yeah.
Compassion, forgiveness, surrender.
I think that kind of brings us back to the understanding of suffering, and understanding that consciousness wanted to know other, and to know other, we come into this world of duality, so that we can actually, to know right, you have to have left. Otherwise, if all you have left, actually nothing could exist.
No.
Unless of form, unless you have duality. But then it's realising that we're beyond the duality, but also accepting that we still live in that duality, and that
paradox.
And once you understand the simplicity of that, and you can feel that draw, do I turn left or do I turn right? And then, okay, I center myself and feel, okay, right. And you will learn the lessons you need from whichever way you turn, but maybe don't turn towards suffering,
Don't
or,
you? Well,
or turn towards your shadow and
suffering's an
work it
indication
out.
that something's out of alignment, and you can choose to heal through love, or you can choose to heal through other modes. They're all available. You know, at the end of the day, what did we set up here? The mandala of that center point of stillness and calm, which is your higher heart's wisdom, and then the outer boundary that we each need to discover how far out, as sensitive beings, how far out is my boundary that I can feel safe within, so that this magic can occur. And if I'm starting to feel like I'm suffering, then something's come up that I need to go back in to look at, to bring love to, consciousness to, healing to. In the same way that a child that's bumped its head or got scared about something will come running back to mummy or daddy, they get that holding.
And it take time before they go back out.
Yeah, we're not pushing them back out going, don't be silly. Oh, you're in pain, come back. So I'm my own inner mother, I'm my own inner father, and I have the choice to be very different to my own parents and to just be that love and to be that boundary, which is that masculine consciousness. The female energy, as we said, is that sapping energy, that filling up from within, that nourishing, and then that boundary is held by that sacred masculine. It's like, this is too far for you right now. This is safe for you. And that we listen to our own counsel, that that inner child knows this is actually the safest thing to do, you know, is to listen to these messages. And not to be distracted by the outside saying do this, do that, you know, do the other, because there's so many layers of our consciousness anyway. It's like, you know, mental body, emotional body, pain body, all that kind of thing. But like, to really get a true sense of what's going on here, we have to be connected to the earth, and we have to be connected to our breath, and to the fact that there's constant stream of consciousness flowing through us. It's there. It's there. So tune into it. And the more that you practice tuning into it, which only needs to take a second, it's just a breath, like what you just did, the more you'll become sensitive to it. And every time something throws us off, it's another opportunity to learn exactly what you said about that consciousness, knowing itself, coming back into unity. And actually we're living at a time on earth now where we can truly choose to co-create our reality and not to be co-creating from suffering. That is a choice. Suffering is just becomes a signal that something needs addressing, but it's not our main mode of learning anymore. That's our choice. So I'm choosing love.
I think that would be our main message, isn't it? To people to start to do that inner work and face yourselves.
Yeah, don't be frightened.
And,
and also don't feel compelled, like your heart will lead you to the right teacher.
The right book.
The right
however
book.
It comes.
Yeah, the right message. When you ask for help, you'll get it. Like if you ask for support from your highest good of all, I say every morning I say, I'm aligning with Earth's ascension timeline. I am aligning with my divine design timeline. I'm making a choice to be the best version of me on this planet, because there are infinite possibilities. So if I make that choice, then I know everything that comes up in that day is to help me align more with it, and also to show me when I'm not in alignment with it. So every time you drive, you're in a queue, you get that chance to come back. You never ever need to be bored again. It's like...
For those that would say, well, I don't know what it is I want, so what is it I need to ask for? And I think this is actually quite interesting, that when you realise the powers that are there and the magic that's there, then I think it's good to, you can just affirm that for my highest good, for my highest purpose, for highest, you don't have to take that, you don't have to ask for something specific.
No.
Because sometimes the danger in doing that is if you really aren't attuned with it, you actually can cause yourself more.
Yeah, so start off, if you don't know what you want, start off with, I want to know what I want. I want to know what brings me joy. What do I need today? What does my body need today? I'm tired, I want rest, I want peace. So you start to build a dialogue with your body, mind, heart, which if you haven't done before, it's terrifying. It's like being dropped in the middle of an ocean with nothing, right? So that's where the physical needs are a good place to start, It's like, okay, I feel like I need a hug, so a hug is nurturing, right? So I need nurturing today, okay? I feel like I need some space, I'm agitated, so I need some peace. And you can work it out with your mind and your emotions. They will lead you to your heart if you ask. But we have this whole thing of, my soul's purpose, I must find my mission, what am I here to do? You're here to be love. We're all here to be love. We're all here to express love and to discover the things that most excite us and to share those gifts.
Guide one another.
And guide one another. But we also need structure to help that. So we need to learn how to keep those gifts flowing. It's not just about the follow your bliss, it's how can I keep that bliss in a constant flow? And what is the value of it not being present when it's not present? Because if you keep getting into the monkey mind rigidness of how things have to be, let go of control. That's a good thing for everyone. I am wanting to know how to surrender needing to be in control, because that's fear. Yeah? I'm wanting to know
Give yourself.
yeah, how to live in love, you know, like I'm wanting to know trust. I think it's asking the questions.
Yeah, definitely. It's beautifully said.
It's great talking with you.
And you. I enjoyed
Do
it.
it again. Oh. Can't wait.
One question was that with IVF, if people are on that low frequency, some people on IVF still don't get pregnant, do they? So that
No,
would be a really
lots
clear
of people don't.
So that would be a real clear message, but some do.
Yeah.
So there is still some souls that are coming for that.
Yeah. We've got to work with the consciousness of where people are at. So I work with IVF a lot. You know, like I work with clients that are going through cycles of IVF, and it's bringing the consciousness to it, the consciousness to the egg, to the sperm, to getting themselves in as good a condition as possible. Because how much time they've got that they can get pregnant depends on how old they are, how many eggs they've got left, like how many quantum leaps can you make. And it's not like, you know, I would like to be careful about blanket statements because sometimes it can be misinterpreted. There is a place for everything. It's just the way that it's used that's the problem. And we are living in a current paradigm where many women and men expect they're going to have trouble getting pregnant. They're going to start trying to get pregnant. That implies a problem from the start. The truth is many people are struggling to get pregnant because I don't see it so much about age, I see it about health, and our health is degenerating so quickly because of what we think healthy diet and healthy lifestyle is. It's very different. Going to the gym all the time exhausts your adrenal glands. That's not healthy, you know. The same with being on a really strict diet because of this, that isn't, you know, we've got stuck in that mental mode. So you can have conscious IVF. There is an organisation called Create which focuses on one egg, the best egg, rather than let's do all of them. But again, I've worked with clients who've had really good experiences with them, and I had worked with clients who felt that they were just pushed through very quickly and it didn't work, you know, the way they didn't feel nurtured. If we're going to have these modes, we need to bring the heart and consciousness into them and see them as a bridge back to health, rather than a necessity because actually we just can't do it anymore. Yeah. So again, from within it can change. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, perfect sense.
And the healthier, I mean, I know that the healthier a woman and man are, because the man is so important. You know, the DNA that forms the placenta is the male sperm DNA, right? So if a woman rejects, if her body's rejecting that, what's going on? And it's an alien invasion, right? It's like, so that harmonising and how important a man's health is as important as the woman. It's a 50-50 thing. So that means then that the healthier we are, we double our chances of success with IVF. But it's mind, heart, body, spirit.
So it's for a couple to work on themselves,
Absolutely.
to both raise their vibration.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, it's when you come in together in union that you're creating this life, and
Absolutely.
so that's where it,
And having worked with a lot of women who've had repeat miscarriages, who have had lots of failed cycles and who've had genetic issues, and clearing those issues through clearing all of these toxicities. I've seen miracles, literally, so many miracles. The only difference between them and the other women is that they didn't give up on doing the processing work. There comes a point that some women get scared and their partners are like, how much money are we going to spend? What are we going to do? It's like, this is inner work, you know. This is a gift to every future generation that flows through you. And if you're patient with it, and for some it's 3 months, for others it's a year, you will make this really big shift that you'll be so glad you made. I like to work with people for at least a year before they're actually really planning, because the time lag for sperm and egg is 3 to 4 months, you know, in terms of what's released now. So that biological clock pressure that unfortunately I do see IVF clinics, like when you look at the statistics, the reason they're like, do it now, is the statistics are actually really crap. They're really low, even with this process. And I see women in this state of consciousness where they're like, am I pregnant, am I pregnant, am I pregnant? You know, it's crazy, but we could have another conversation about that.
That would.
Yeah.
For more information and finding you online and...
I am Rozy Glow, so ROZYGLOW.com. So rosyglow.com, and Enjoy Yoga is INJOY-yoga.com. That's a Croydon-based community interest company. But Rozy Glow is where my heart is, as in where I'm operating from now. So
Thank you so
yes,
much.
do.
Thanks, Rozy.
I think I just
That was wonderful.